Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 19. Not no idea, just not much of one. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. And welcome back to the Stories Told podcast, where today we're talking about a favorite episode from season 2 of Stargate SG1, The Fifth Race. But first of all, how are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you. Very well. And how about your works in progress and other projects? How are things going?
It's moving along now. I have been waiting to get feedback from my editor, the first Zara book, which I just recently received. So now that is my main focus, is going through those edits, checking them out, seeing all the little mistakes I made, and hopefully fixing them. So that'll take some days. So I'm working on that and still playing around with mocking up cover designs. That's where I'm at. How are you? What are you up to?
You know, I have been fallen a little bit behind. As you know, we had to say goodbye to our dog. And so I've been kind of muddling through grief, which has slowed me down on my productivity. Feeling like I'm kind of working through it comfortably, not pushing myself too hard. So I expect within the next couple of days, I'm going to get back into the writing and start producing again and getting some stuff out. I can feel it niggling in the back of my mind. Hey, you want to write about this? Hey, you want to write about that? Which is a good sign.
I'm sorry about hearing that.
Thank you.
You know, it's like you said, it's a part of life, and hopefully, you can manage that and eventually get back to writing.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're right. It is a part of life, but sometimes it still sucks.
Yeah, it always still sucks.
Anyway, and how about consuming of stories? Have you come across any great stories lately? You know, videos, movies, television, books?
Yes, so I think I mentioned last week I was doing a beta read for a friend of mine.
Yeah.
So I finished that beta read. It's a middle grade horror novel, and it was wonderful. Great read. It's horror, so it's creepy, of course. It's not too over the top because it's middle grade, but it also has some humor and some good heartwarming elements. Really good. I'm glad I read it and gave her feedback on it, and I hope she's able to get it published.
Very good.
What about you?
I'm still working through that Stormlight Archive, still loving it. And every time I think I know what's going to happen in that story, it goes differently, and I enjoy that. I love being surprised.
Oh, that's great. I'm looking forward to reading that.
Yeah, and I think because it is such a huge, huge story in an incredibly detailed world, there is that flexibility to do surprising things and still move the story forward. And I'm really enjoying that. Well, let's talk now about The Fifth Race. So I'm going to read a summary from the StargateFandom.com wiki, and this is just a synopsis of this episode. Colonel Jack O'Neill accidentally encounters a machine which downloads an entire ancient database into his mind and causes his brain activity to increase. He begins to be unable to speak English, but only in a completely new language, Ancient. There is nothing the team can do to prevent the transformation, so O'Neill is forced to go his own way to save himself. So what do you like about this episode?
Well, I like this episode. It's a lot of fun. At first, grabs your attention right at the start, where they go to this other planet, and it seems to be just a room that they teleport into, or that they Stargate into. And very quickly, the device grabs O'Neill around the head, and you don't know what happens. They just like, okay, that was weird. He passes out. Seems like it's something really bad. And they go back to Stargate Command, and hours later, he's fine. They don't learn what's going on for a bit, which is good. Classic.
But we of course know everything is not fine, right? As the viewers,
yes. Yeah. It is classic Stargate, right? It opens a mystery in the early part of the episode, and you kind of figure it out along with the characters as it goes along. I liked how this episode, kind of like the Tantalus episode and some of the others, expands the universe. Yeah. It gives us more background on what's out there. We'd heard about these races. This is the first time they get to interact with this thing, and we get to see him be affected. He learns the language. Well, he doesn't really learn the language, but it's sort of injected into his brain. He learns all this technology. I love that. I like how it grows the world, not only in space, because now they go to another galaxy. Time, like how long have these things been around? Right? These beings that made the Stargates and the Asgard, it's hinted at, but we don't know. So it really makes the universe feel huge.
Well, and I like how there is some role reversal in this episode, because it's usually Daniel or Sam who are doing the problem solving, sort of the mental and intellectual problem solving, whereas O'Neill and Teal'c are doing sort of the strategic and sort of warrior-based problem solving. And so we had some role reversal here where O'Neill was the one who was having to do the problem solving.
Yeah, I had a similar note. I love how they set up another catastrophe on this other planet Sam went to, and they're about to die over there, right? There's a second sun. They're about to burn up, and there's no easy solution. They come up with these different things, and it's like, well, they're just going to burn to a crisp over there. And Neil was able to solve it with his newly acquired knowledge. He didn't even really know what was going on. He just knew he had to do this thing.
Yeah.
I liked that. I liked the other thing that was going on. It showed us he gained more knowledge than just the language. It was a very clear show versus tell moment. Get to see him use that technology, or use his knowledge to give them the plans for the dial device.
And he also solved his own problem. He utilized this information that had been downloaded to save himself as well.
Exactly. And that brought up an interesting conundrum, right? Another difficult sort of moral question, a choice for General Hammond, right? He wants to trust Jack.
Yeah.
At the same time, he doesn't know what's going on with him, and so he's reluctant to just let him do his thing. All he knows, what's been injected into Jack's head is some nefarious thing. Yeah, he has no idea. He has to make that decision. Do we let him go, or do we lock him down?
This is a consistency in character that we see in General Hammond, that he trusts his people. He doesn't make precipitous decisions. He waits and sees what's happening next. And so, there's a moment where Jack all of a sudden starts downloading Stargate addresses into the computer, and General Hammond is objecting to this because he's uncomfortable with, again, as you said, he doesn't know what's going on in his mind. He could be something nefarious in his mind. And so now he's messing with the computer. So he stops him from doing that, but he doesn't take any additional actions. He doesn't incarcerate him, or he doesn't require that he get, be sedated and tied down to a hospital bed. He takes his people's behavior one step at a time. And I love that consistency in character that we see in General Hammond every single time.
Yeah, they do a good job with all the characters in the show. That way, I think. Yeah, and this is the second one we're doing. It's so nice to hang out in the Stargate world again. I love watching these old episodes. Let me think. Something else that I liked was, this goes back to the movie. Which now that I think about it, we probably should have reviewed the movie before doing the show, but that's okay. We'll run with the show. So, but in the movie, I remember when I first saw it back in whatever early '90s, whenever that came out. I thought it was cool how here's this thing that's just been lying around on Earth this whole time, that it's from this very advanced alien civilization, and it interacted with the stuff that we see in the world, like the pyramids and the way that the gods are represented. Right? I really liked how they tied that in. I thought that was great. And they do something like that in this episode too, just a small thing with the language that he speaks, how it's related to Latin. So it's not only an Egyptian thing.
Yes.
Now we've also incorporated Latin into it. I think in an earlier episode when they mentioned the Asgards originally, how there was like Thor's hammer or something. I love how they bring these different elements from these mythologies into our real world. That's one of the things I really like about this universe.
Yeah, it was the Norse runes that they bring in, and those mythologies. Yeah, but it's funny that you should mention the movie, because there is one little niggly thing from the movie that references back to this episode, and it's kind of, it's just something that occurs when you create a story such as the movie with no real thought that this is going to be moving on into a new universe. So in the movie, when they send the team through the Stargate for the first time, they think they are going to, I think it was like they were moving into another universe. I should look this up, because it was like the cadmium universe, something like that. And then when we get into the the television series, we are only in our galaxy instead of moving into another galaxy. That's what I'm trying to say. We go to another galaxy in the movie, but in the series we stay in our own galaxy until this episode, where then it establishes that you need to have 8 symbols to go into another galaxy. So it's this one little inconsistency, and it's not a big deal, and it just is evidence of how sometimes a story can take on its own life, and you have rules that you establish in the first story that then you have to change as you go on, because the story has grown and developed in new ways.
I don't remember that. That's good. But yeah, that's a good point too. It's increasingly more difficult the longer a show is running, right? The longer a world exists and the more entries go into that world, whether it's Stargate or Star Trek or Star Wars or whatever. The more content you put out, the more likely you are to have information that conflicts with what came before. Hard to avoid that.
Exactly. It's very hard to stay consistent when you don't realize how big your world is and your universe is going to get.
We could do. Sorry,
trying to see if I can remember. It's bugging me, so I'm going to have to look it up.
Yeah, I liked. There's a new galaxy introduced now. That's cool. It opens up not only that galaxy potentially, but many other galaxies. You know, if you go to that one, why not others? Although I guess they get farther and farther away. And then the new race. We finally get to see the Greys, the Asgardians. That's so cool.
Okay, I found it. It is the Kalium galaxy. They thought it was on the other side of the known universe. And then when we started the series, we kind of reframed that and put Abydos actually fairly close to Earth in the Milky Way galaxy. It does. And I'm totally willing to forgive that one small niggling detail, because again, it's just a sign that they didn't realize how much great material they had to work with to turn into a television series.
I heard that I think the original writer of the movie, they were planning to do trilogy, I think. The sequel never got off the ground. They moved on to other things. So what would you improve in this episode?
You know, there's very little I would improve. I think this is a very tight episode. The only thing I think that I might change, and we've talked about this before, this is a reflection of the ability to process information more quickly, to be able to stream series, which is not the way this was designed to be originally watched. It was originally watched, designed to be watched on a weekly basis, but being able to stream it, you can pick up stuff going faster. At the very, very beginning, before we even get to the credits, the opening credits, we've got Jack. They show up in this room. It's a mysterious space. Even Teal'c has said it's important we go here because this is the language of one of the races on Ernest's planet, so they must have something of value here. Sam is saying, where's the energy coming from? How are the lights powered, etc. And O'Neill is like, we gotta go. And that would have been, I think, consistent with his character in the first season. But now that we've moved into the second season, with all the things that these characters have gone through already, I would have expected O'Neill to go, okay, let's explore. If you guys think it's worth staying, let's explore to see if we can find some cool military tech. Instead of him going, we need to leave within 30 seconds of arriving.
That's a good observation. I think when I saw it, I think I had a similar reaction. I didn't note it, but you pointing it out, yeah, I think that's true. It seemed a little odd because there was no threat. It had been, it's 130 degrees in here. I'm not waiting around here for you guys to satisfy your curiosity. That would have been one thing, but it was just like, it's a room. They could have spent half hour looking around, seeing what was going on. That's true. I like that.
It's a really small, unbelievably niggling thing that I have the luxury of being able to point out from my position in my chair after, streaming it. It's just not that big a deal. Very similarly, sort of how long it took them to figure out something was going on with Jack.
That seems to be a theme in some of these episodes. I think that was just like a stylistic thing back then, maybe, or for this show. I mentioned that last time. Daniel was in the other universe. It's like,
yes.
I mean, you knew something was up right off the start, Daniel. Come on. It took him a long time to figure out, okay, this is what's happening.
And I think that goes back to, as we've talked about before, sort of the way that stories were paced.
Yeah, exactly.
20 years ago.
It was pulled out a little bit, like not dragged out, but sort of walking the viewer through it a little more, maybe. So that, let's really make sure people understand what's happening here, I guess.
We forget, or I forget, that these episodes were interrupted with commercials every 10 or 15 minutes.
That's another good point.
So they might have felt it necessary, the writers, to reorient you to the story after you just spent 60, 120 seconds being told what kind of car to buy. And
that's a very good
which
point,
pizza's
too.
The best that we don't have to deal with anymore, for which I am
so the one
deeply
thing
grateful.
That I was looking for in this episode is at the very end, when Neo comes back to Earth and the Stargate Command. I really wanted to see him tell the rest of the team, and I wanted to see their reactions. It's like he saw these aliens for the first time, the Greys, and I just wanted some payoff there. So much so that I started the next episode to see if we'd get that. Okay, well, let's see what their reaction to this is. Of course, the next episode is the black hole episode, which you have previously discussed on this podcast. I love that one. I started watching, and then I ended up watching that one all the way through too.
That is such a good episode. One of my absolute favorites. And as we're talking about, going to the other planet and meeting the Asgards, which are, of course, Roswell Greys. The only thing that I had a little bit of a complaint there is not really a storytelling piece, but sort of just a design piece. I thought that the set for the Asgard was too simplistic. And maybe they had to spend their money on the sort of puppet that they created. And so they just had a painted background for the world, but it just seemed a little simplistic for this is our first introduction to this incredible alien culture, and we don't learn anything about the culture from what we're able to see.
Hallway, wasn't it? I'm trying to remember.
I love that they made them the Roswell Greys. I think that just added so many wonderful layers
to our own mythologies that we have.
Have you ever read any of the Stargate novelizations? I love them. They're so much fun. Some of them are, better than others, obviously. But they've done a really good job. These novelists have done a really good job of maintaining the character voice and the universe and sticking with it. And the reason I bring it up is because there is one book where they have to deal with the Asgard again, and it's revealed that O'Neill gave Thor a t-shirt from Area 51 with a picture of one of the Roswell aliens that says "I am an alien" on it. And it's just such a funny thing to read in this book, and you can totally see O'Neill doing this. I'll put a link in our show notes with some of the titles that I've read that I've enjoyed, if anyone else is interested in reading those books, because I think they're very enjoyable. I discovered them when I was traveling and found them in a airport bookstore. And
I've read some of the way back in the 80s. I read some of the Star Trek books, and I read a bunch of the Star Wars Expanded Universe books. I never read any of the Stargate books.
Back to the Fifth Race.
Yeah, just to see, it was such a momentous thing. Neil must have been bursting at the seams to tell them this. Those gray aliens? I saw them.
But let's walk through that. What would that actually look like from a character perspective? General Hammond would want to debrief. Sam would want to know about their technology and about traveling through the Stargate to another galaxy. Jackson would be pestering him for all the details that he could get about this new culture. How would that scene work to give you the payoff?
I think you would want to do something like the way it ended. Now was he's like, I think we're going to be okay, right? Which to me was like, I mean, that's kind of cool and sappy, but it doesn't. it left me wanting. If he at least said something like, "Never guess who I met," or something like that, to indicate he had met the aliens at least, and you just leave it there, and you talk about it in future episodes. Something. I don't think you want to do what you were saying, where it's like, let's debrief and talk about this. It's too much. You just want to, a line or two, and then maybe see the reaction from the team, like, oh, you saw these aliens, something.
Yeah, you're probably right. That would probably have been very simple to do.
Also,
to get that payoff,
I guess you have to remember that this is only the second episode I'm watching on the rewatch, and it's late into season 2. So the characters have probably already seen a lot more. So maybe in the context of that, it's not quite as momentous for them. I don't know. Justify their ending a little.
Right on target here, because this is the first time outside of the Gould that they have actually met. They haven't met the Asgard yet. We do get to see the Asgard throughout the series, but I don't think, I'm going to do a real quick look here, but I don't think they've met any other of these races except for the Gould. And so to meet one of the, quote unquote, good races, that's a big deal. And I think you're right. I think there might have been more time spent on that big deal. So I'm looking. We've met the Tok'ra, but the Tok'ra are essentially just an offshoot of the Gould, or related to the Gould. And we've met a lot of transplanted. We've met the Nox. So that's the first really, truly non-human species that they've met. That was first season they met the Nox.
This episode,
and they were one of the 4 races.
Going through them, and he said, "Oh, we met them, right?"
Yeah. And of course, the Nox were disinterested in having any kind of relationship with the humans of Earth, the Tauri. That, that connection was kind of pushed to the side. And so now we have a new connection that was not pushed to the side. The Tauri were welcomed by the Asgard. You are now the 5th race. So you're right. I think that was a big enough deal. There could have been more time spent on it.
What rating would you give this episode?
One is 7. How about you?
I think I'd give it an 8, because I enjoyed the mystery and I liked really like the introduction of the aliens and tying that back to Earth. I liked how they tied everything back to Earth again. And it's the start of a relationship with these aliens that will continue through the series.
And we have no idea how really intertwined we become with the Asgard. And I think that as that progressed and evolved was very cool. Awesome. Any other thoughts before we wrap up
no,
the fifth race?
It definitely gets me to want to watch more Stargate.
So we invite our listeners to join us next week as we talk about the season 3 episode Nemesis. And in the meantime, I encourage you to visit Mike's website, which the link to that is in the show notes below, as well as my website. Check out the audiobooks. Huge shout out to our Patreon patrons who are so wonderfully generous in supporting our work. And we encourage you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notifications bell to know when the next podcast comes out. Mike, I hope you have a great week.